consciousness, just the way Lord Chaitanya inundated the subcontinent of India with Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada's destiny was to do that. And when he brought his disciples back from the West, who were enthusiastic but very new disciples, he started sending them various places for preaching work. So Delhi, Calcutta, and Bombay were the first three big cities that Srila Prabhupada worked on, and because this was the capital, it was important. We were only there for maybe a month, but that month seems like it could have been 100 years. It was so important at the time. So these were just the very little beginning foundation blocks of what later became the Delhi ISKCON Temple project.
Prabhupada took us to Vrindavan, and this was like the ultimate experience for us. Prabhupada coming back to his spiritual home with so many sons and daughters. This was the high point of our India experience with Srila Prabhupada, entering the magic spiritual realm of Krishna itself. Everything he had been teaching us for years came into focus. We could see now, oh, this is Vrindavan. Such intimate, sweet exchanges we had.
This visit in 1971 of Srila Prabhupada was very, very historical in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. It was the inauguration of the fulfillment of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda's desire that the holy names of Krishna be spread to every town and village throughout the world. Lord Chaitanya went to Vrindavan, and he sent the 6 Goswamis there to establish it as a place of pilgrimage for people all over the world. When Rupa and Sanatan went to Vrindavan on Lord Chaitanya's order, they were there to establish it as a place of pilgrimage for people all over the world. Obviously for people who would become Vaishnavas from every town and village in the world. That was Lord Chaitanya's vision. And this visit was the beginning of the fulfillment. The first time Vaishnavas from the West who were committed to Krishna consciousness in a relatively large group came on pilgrimage to the holy Dham of Sri Braj.
Like he's so healthy and exuberant. He's back home. This is where he hatched out the whole Hare Krishna movement. This is where Krishna empowered him to come west. Little Saraswati, who's one of his favorites, she went around, followed him wherever he went. Sometimes he would grab her hand and walk with her. If Saraswati didn't come to his room every morning around 8 o'clock, he would sometimes ask, "And where is Saraswati?" He expected to see her every morning. And quite often he would play some trick on her when she came, either to make her laugh or cry. But he would always make up and give her some nice sweet. Here he's showing us the sights, showing us around the samadhis of great Vaishnavas behind Radha Damodar temple, explaining a little bit about who is buried where. In those days it was all run down and practically abandoned. Well, most of Vrindavan was practically run down and abandoned. We used to think that Raman Reti was far out of town. Prabhupada revived the whole spiritual life of India, starting with Vrindavan. Vrindavan flourishing, spiritualized city because of Prabhupada. Of course, Rupa Goswami's samadhi there, Prabhupada's favorite place. He used to say that Rupa Goswami inspired him to go to the West and spread Krishna consciousness. As he would sit in his room and gaze out on his samadhi year after year, and chant and read, translate.
When we arrived in Vrindavan, I remember walking into Srila Prabhupada's room and paying my obeisances and saying, Srila Prabhupada, what should we do now? And he looked down at me and he said, just wander. So that's exactly what I did. I just went out into the Vrindavan village, and everything I'd read about in Nectar of Devotion and Krishna book, I was thinking of those things. And I wanted to take rest under a Kalpa Vriksha tree. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time, so I just actually found one tree in the forest, and I actually fell asleep and slept very soundly and very deeply for a couple hours. And when I woke up, it was evening time, and I didn't really know where everybody was, but I heard in the background the kirtan going on, Hare Krishna, and so I followed the sound, and I arrived at this big program where all Srila Prabhupada and all the devotees were, and the lecture had just stopped, and they were serving out prasadam. So it was a great day in my life, just the way it worked out.
Prabhupada was giving a lecture in a garden. There was a small pandal set up, and many Brijavasis came to attend that. It was somewhere in the area of Radha Govinda temple. And somehow or other I came late, and when I arrived, Prabhupada was just leaving, walking through a field back to his car. People were lined up on both sides to offer obeisances. And I offered obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada stopped in front of me. And when I got up, Prabhupada very affectionately showered his mercy upon me and told me how he was very pleased that I was so much attached to living in Vrindavan.
And I was so ecstatic, and we got into the ambassador car at the Delhi airport. Sharma Sundar was there, and Prabhupada was sitting in the front, and we were riding to Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was quiet, and I was thinking, he's going to give some spiritual sloka about Vrindavan that will inspire us. Prabhupada was quiet. Finally, I hear Prabhupada clear his throat, and he said, cement. We must get cement and build a water tower like that. He pointed out the water tower so we could have sweet water.
But look at that. No, I'll never forget that kirtan. It was like, you could feel demigods showering flowers. And the people were stunned. They'd never, because the way we did kirtan was Prabhupada did kirtan different than the traditional, like Bengali or something. And when we first went to India, we were chanting like Prabhupada, and it was like that people had never heard. It was so potent. Prabhupada leading and the disciples following. These people had never heard anything like it, and they were just thunderstruck. I just loved, kirtan was my savior. It was my shelter. It washed everything away. It washed away all anxieties. To me, the perfection of life is to be with Srila Prabhupada and kirtan. It's like all I want in life, and I don't care where it is or when it is. That's just all I want.
Now, when Srila Prabhupada came to Vrindavan, it was after he had left for less than 5 years. He had gone away to America, presumably to die amongst infidels or be lured by the temptations of the West. But anyhow, when he came back, surrounded by disciples, after having made a famous tour through Surat and other parts of India, big Pandal programs in Calcutta, in Bombay, in New Delhi, that were in the newspapers, were traveling by word of mouth. So when Prabhupada appeared there with a few of his many devotees, it was an astonishing event that people could not ignore. And when he marched through, it was a triumphant march. They did not fail to be deeply impressed, because who else in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, even from the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, could lay claim to such a feat.
Srila Prabhupada took us to many holy spots in Vrindavan. We would go by bus and he would ride in his ambassador car. And here we are at Brahmanda Ghat in Gokul, where Mother Yasoda saw the universe in Krishna's mouth. Srila Prabhupada is telling the story, much to our delight. His eyes get big when Mother Yasoda sees the creation. For most of us, this is the first time we'd seen the Jamuna, and we were very eager to bathe in her transcendental waters.
The bus went to Gokul, and we came out. Dinanath Prabhu was leading the kirtan, and Prabhupada came out of his ambassador car, which was in front of the bus. And we walked for some time up behind Prabhupada doing Harinam Sankirtan. Prabhupada stopped us, turned around, and said, "This is the wrong Gokul. This is Ballabhacharya's Gokul. We want to go to Mahavan Gokul." So then we all got back in the buses. And from there, from what I remember, we went to Brahmanda Ghat, where we saw the beauty of the holy river Jamuna. Prabhupada came down with us, and he sprinkled water on his head. And then he told all the devotees that they should have full bath. And I believe Prabhupada was feeling somewhat ill that day, so he said that he was not going to take full bath. So he was sitting on the steps, and the devotees were bathing, and Prabhupada was watching us. He was so happy. His disciples, who he loved so very, very dearly, who he gave his life and soul to give them Krishna's love. Here they were in Gokul at the holy banks of Brahmanda Ghat, happily taking their baths in the sacred river Jamuna. What that must have meant for Prabhupada.
He's sitting there watching us take bath, and pretty soon he wants to go in with us. What can I do? My devotees want me. Come on, Prabhupada, come on in. Here we are, saying our Gayatris on sacred threads, standing in the Jamuna River. Ah, there he comes. Ah, Prabhupada. No.
A few of the ladies were kind of clustered together, and Palika was there. And at some point we noticed that Srila Prabhupada was going in the water, although at first it didn't look like he was going to go in. Suddenly it was like, Prabhupada's going in. I looked at Palika, we had the same reaction. We're going in too. We have to be in there with Prabhupada. And we have to do it fast because he's going to say Gayatri, and we wanted to say Gayatri with him. But both of us had only been in India for like a month. And we knew that the ladies bathed in Yamuna, but we didn't know how they did it. Should we go in with our full saris and then walk around dripping wet? Because we only had a few seconds. Palika was down to her slip. And I was like, okay, me too. And it didn't matter anyway, because as soon as we hit the water, we went right under. So we were up to our necks in water anyway, so we were covered. And we wanted to get as close to Prabhupada as we could while he was saying Gayatri, and we got really close, like within 10 feet of him. And we just, our little heads, were like scrunched under the water, and we got to say Gayatri with Prabhupada that day.
And to me, that's the most memorable experience of the whole thing, was that Gayatri in the water with Prabhupada so close.
During the afternoons, Prabhupada would give darshan, and the devotees were sent out to do Harinam Sankirtan. And during that time, I had the great fortune of sitting in the room and attending all of his darshans each day. They were very intimate. Brijabasis would come, his old friends, godbrothers would come, Goswamis would come, sometimes guests would come, and Prabhupada would just sometimes speak to them very informally, sometimes he would preach to them very strongly, and sometimes he just had loving conversations. I'll never forget when Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came to see Prabhupada. I happened to be walking down the street one day, and I met Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj and told him I was going to see Srila Prabhupada, and he very eager, he said, "I will go with you, I want to see Swamiji, or Swami Maharaj." He called him Swami Maharaj. And when we came, there was a guard who was one of the more senior devotees. He was standing at the stairways guarding who was coming up to the darshan. And of course, he welcomed me to come up because he knew that Prabhupada was favorable to me attending the darshans each night. But when he saw Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, he stopped him. He said, "Who are you?" And when he was introduced as Prabhupada's godbrother, he said, no, you cannot go. So Babaji Maharaj wanted to go anyway, and he wanted to stop him. And I told that devotee, "Please ask Prabhupada. He's one of the most beloved devotees of Vrindavan, especially in Gaudiya Maths." And a messenger came back and said, "Yes, Prabhupada immediately wants to see him." So we went up together, and Srila Prabhupada, when he saw Babaji Maharaj, he was sitting behind a little desk, and there was maybe about 6 or 7 people that he was talking to in the room, and Prabhupada got up, and they embraced, and they were just laughing and talking in Bengali. Prabhupada brought Babaji Maharaj to sit next to him behind the desk, and the whole time they were just laughing and talking and looking at each other with so much affection. And the 6 or 7 people who were there were completely forgotten, so they left. And I just sat there, just watching this interaction. I couldn't understand a word of it because they were speaking Bengali language. But I learned so much, not by their language, but just by seeing the genuine love that these two great personalities had for each other, and the intimate relationship they shared. And they were constantly saying Hare Krishna and laughing. I understood then that this is the goal of life, to have this type of love with Vaishnavas in sharing the mission of the spiritual master and pure love for Radha and Krishna. I think they were together for probably almost 45 minutes to an hour. And then Prabhupada made sure Babaji Maharaj got nice prasad.
We went to Mr. Saraf's house, and he had just decided to give us the land in Raman Reti. There was a slip of paper that said yes and a slip of paper that said no. Our friend Shama Devi from London and Kenya and Vrindavan also wanted this piece of land. She had a ashram down the street in Raman Reti, and this would be an expansion for her. She was vying for it. Radharani arranged so that we picked the right slip of paper that said yes, And so Mr. Sarv was finalizing this process at his house, signing the papers, the deeds, and Shamasunda was with me, and he had a portable typewriter, and he was making this draft. At the same time, Gaurachan Goswami and Madan Mohan Goswami had shown up because they were contending and wanting money for Prabhupada's rooms in Radha Damodar Temple. At the same time, Prabhupada had sent me to Mathura to arrange for these rooms for life as a seva. It's a technicality, and so we were also drawing up this draft. The interesting thing is that even though Madan Mohan Goswami and Gaurachan Goswami lived across the same courtyard at Radha Damodar Temple, they were not speaking, and they were both in Goswami families. So Prabhupada put Gaurachan Goswami in one room, Madan Mohan Goswami in another room. I was going from room to room. Sarmasunda was making up documents. At the same time, Sharma Devi came with a member of parliament and a policeman to try and contest this land being given to Prabhupada. We put her in another room. So Mr. Sarv's house was full of people who were not talking and arguing and contending, and Sarmasunda was making up documents. At this point, Krishna Das Babaji shows up, Prabhupada's godbrother. Somehow or other, he always knew when Prabhupada was coming to Vrindavan. This was not announced, there was no emails. And he shows up from Radhakund, and he laughs and chants. He didn't speak much. He laughed a lot, he chanted a lot. One time he left his bead bag in a nun's room, and we immediately had a poll how fast he would be to return to get it. And I said, well, at least within the minute. And sure enough, he came back and got his beads. So I called Prabhupada the ringmaster, because he was like a circus ringmaster, taming clowns and lions and contesting people. And all the documents were drawn up. We got the rooms in Radha Damodar for life. We got the land. Sharma Devi couldn't do anything. And Krishna Das chanted and laughed. And there was a wonderful day at Mr. Sarif's house.
After the incredibly successful Pandal in Delhi, where tens of thousands of people were coming every night to hear Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada took just a few of us, 20 or 30, to Vrindavan. So after all the fanfare in Delhi, the lights, and distributing prasadam to all those people and the dignitaries that came, here we were in this simple village with Srila Prabhupada. And I think all of us, certainly myself, felt how much Prabhupada cared for us. That after this big preaching program, he would take the time and the trouble to bring us to Vrindavan. We stayed in a small place, Saraf Bhavan, which is about a mile from Loy Bazaar. And every day we would go by bus to different holy places. We went to Govardhan, Radhakund, Barsana.
When Srila Prabhupada was being carried on that Vrajabasi palanquin up and down the hill of Barsana, the devotees were just so blissful, so happy to see Prabhupada being carried in this way. And although it appeared like a very uncomfortable way of traveling, Prabhupada was bouncing back and forth. Srila Prabhupada looked so blissful. At times he smiled so blissfully, just so happy to be amongst his devotees, roaming through the hills and mountains of Barsana, Shri Radharani's place of pastimes.
Govardhan, Prabhupada was taking prasadam. Malati used to travel with us always and cook for Prabhupada. Even on the bus, Prabhupada would sit in the front seat because his car had broken down. So he would be on the front seat of the bus, and Malati would be in the back seat doing whatever she was doing. Nobody knew for sure. But then, eventually, she would come through the aisle of the bus and present to Prabhupada a beautiful plate of prasadam. It was a little bit miraculous how she did that. So she was Prabhupada's cook during this time, and I remember in Govardhan, she served Prabhupada his prasadam and a dog wandered by, a hungry dog. And Malati was about to give it the standard hut to drive it away, when Prabhupada stopped her and threw a piece of his samosa to this dog, which actually delighted Malati. She was happy to see, and also to hear Prabhupada say that no living entity should go hungry in Krishna's dham.
He was constantly concerned with everyone's health and well-being. And everyone had a task. Prabhupada would assign the different duties, jobs, and tasks for each of us, and we would all report to him every day what we had accomplished. He would give us guidance for the next day's tasks. We had to become Vaishnavas finally, in manner and in dress. So Prabhupada taught us all the ropes, all the different ways the Vaishnava should act in India. By example, we got to follow him around and watch him every moment. We just began to emulate what Prabhupada did.
It was really a very spectacular event for the Brijbasis, because I was living amongst the Brijbasis, and they were really proud of Srila Prabhupada, that one of their local residents who was living for so many years at Vamsi Gopal Temple and Radha Damodar Temple had gone to the West and started temples and transformed Americans and Europeans into devotees of Sri Sri Radha Shamsundar. This was just astounding, amazing for the Brijbasis. And thus they really had very, very high esteem for Srila Prabhupada. They considered him to be like the ambassador of Vrindavan for the world. They were looking forward to seeing the American and European sadhus coming. Prabhupada would have the devotees doing Harinam, Sankirtan, the streets, and it had a very heartwarming effect on the residents of Vrindavan. They were joyful to see people from all over the world, young people, full of life and opportunities, who had accepted their culture, their faith, and especially they accepted the mercy of Srimati Radharani. This was very meaningful to the Brijbasis. At that time, I was with Prabhupada from the Mangalarti through the evening. But then after the evening darshans, I would go back and just to the bank of Jamuna, and I would be with my friends, the local inhabitants of Vrindavan, and they were very much talking about the glories of Srila Prabhupada. It was the first time Vrindavan had ever seen anything like this in history. Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago in Vrindavan and performed his transcendental pastimes. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came 500 years ago. By his order, the Goswamis began to excavate and establish the places of Vrindavan. And through the years, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and all these great acharyas performed their pastimes of worship there. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur brought many thousands of people on his Braj Mandala Parikrama. But never before in the history of Braj Bhumi did people from all over the world, from outside of India, come in a spirit of devotion to worship Sri Sri Radha and Krishna.
This was a very bizarre experience. It's like the people were just like mobbing. It got to be this almost like a frenzy, like a hysteria. You know, it's like they were so excited to have the devotees there. And as we're going down the street, we're knocking over like vegetable stalls and it was like. And so Prabhupada appeared to be feeling ill, like we couldn't tell if he was sleeping or if he was fainting, you know. And then we ended up in this, some kind of sports stadium or something, remember that? And Prabhupada was in this little room, and we closed the gates, you know, like these big wooden doors. And then the people just wanted to see Prabhupada, but Prabhupada wasn't well. And so the devotees got him in this room and just kind of closed the room and wouldn't let the people come in, and they just got more and more upset, and they were kind of like banging on these gates trying to get in, and I was getting like scared. Like, were they going to break down the doors and like stampede us and what they were going to do? Because they were getting a little angry too. And it was like that. People just like thronged Prabhupada like some rock star or something, you know. They wanted to rip him apart and get a piece of him. And so I don't think Prabhupada ever did speak. I don't even remember how we got Prabhupada out of it. But I do remember that he sent groups of devotees out to have contact with the people. I remember myself and Narayan being sent out as a team. And we went to this little temple, and I think Narayan gave a little talk, and we had a little kirtan, and the people were satisfied. They wanted to see us, too, you know, the white sadhus, you know. It was just so exciting for them to see these white sadhus. See, look at Prabhupada, he looks... Because sometimes he was like sitting on this thing, like with his eyes closed and his head nodding, like we didn't know if he'd like had a stroke or if he'd fainted from the heat or if he was sleeping, you know, it was just really strange.
This was one of the most intimate and relaxing highlights Prabhupada's stay in Jaipur, in the palace grounds, as a guest of the Queen, Gayatri Devi. But she was so thankful to have Prabhupada there. The devotees coming in and out of the Govindaji's temple would parade by Prabhupada's bungalow throughout the day. And there were so many wonderful devotees in Jaipur. Every one of Prabhupada's lectures, morning and night, were packed with thousands of people, devotees of the Govindaji temple there. And he was appreciated in Jaipur in a way that he had not been appreciated in other cities in India. Almost every citizen came to these speaking engagements. They were already full-fledged Vaishnava devotees. He was very happy in Jaipur.
At that time, Prabhupada lived in a grass hut. There was no other place to live in it. I remember Prabhupada one time was sitting in the grass hut and he just said, this grass hut is an abode of goodness. And this is all you need for spiritual life, live in a grass hut and live by the side of the holy river, chant Hare Krishna. But if we do this, people won't come here. So we have to build the big buildings with concrete and steel and bricks. Those buildings are in the mode of passion. But for preaching, we can build those buildings. But for our own selves, this should be enough.
Before the festival, I had approached Srila Prabhupada on the balcony in Calcutta and said, Srila Prabhupada, I've been trying to understand what you want of us, what your desire is. I could see that Srila Prabhupada was really listening and taking every word into his heart. And then I said, 2 things seem to please you the most. Distributing your books and building the big temple in Mayapur. And Srila Prabhupada's eyes opened wide, his face lit up, he smiled, and he glanced at me and he said, yes, you have understood. And then he said, if you build this temple in Mayapur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur will personally come and take you all back to God?
Bhavananda Prabhu said, Srila Prabhupada, we're sitting in the middle of these rice fields. I'm from New York. He says, Ravi, the architect, is from Amsterdam. You know, we're all from cities. We're all from big cities. And we're sitting in the middle of these rice fields, and you're asking us to build a big temple in the city. How we can do this, Prabhupada? And he said, Prabhupada, where will all the money come from? And Prabhupada said, Bhavananda is always thinking, where will money come from? He said, actually, here you have Radha Madhava. He said, Madhava means the husband or goddess of fortune. Simply serve Madhava nicely, and everything will come. You don't have to worry about money. Well, Prabhupada, we don't know where to start even. They had the design for the Lotus building, and you know, where to put it. We're really bewildered, standing in the middle of rice fields. You know, Prabhupada, he didn't procrastinate, as we say. So Prabhupada said, come with me. We had 3 acres of land at that time, 1 strip of land from the road. So Prabhupada, he put a clod of earth down, then he just paced so far down, then he put another clod of earth, then he just turned and he paced the other way, put another clod of earth, paced up the other end. So he put 4 clods of earth, and he said, build it here. That was it.
This is Prabhupada establishing the Anantasation in 1972. He invited all of his God brothers to come. And many God brothers had already left, so there were disciples of God brothers, his spiritual nephews. He invited them all to come. And then he spoke to them that the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted us to all work together. So why don't we all combine and work together? Now I have temples around the world, and I can give you some devotees from foreign countries to help the preaching. We should all work together. But they didn't accept. Didn't really say anything.
He had told us to dig a pit. And we dug a pit about 15 feet deep and probably around 6 to 8 feet wide with a bamboo ladder going down inside. He said he was going to set the cornerstone. We had no idea what setting a cornerstone was going to be like. But apparently his friend and godbrother Puri Maharaj had come bringing a little solid 24 karat gold Anantasesha. It was about 1.5 inches high. So Prabhupada was going down in the pit, and Ashoka Amrita was holding the ladder. And then somebody came, Prabhupada wants you. What? He wants you to go down in the pit. Why he wants me to go down in the pit? And I saw Prabhupada is walking down the ladder, and I came over, and I went down in the pit with Srila Prabhupada. And to me it was symbolic enough, a ladder, I'm in the pit with a ladder, and Prabhupada, what more do I want? We gather an accumulation of bricks, and then a bucket comes down with mortar and a trowel. So I didn't know what to do, and Prabhupada said, just gestured at us. We are building a temple here, he said like that. So I pick up a brick and I butter it with mortar and I set it down, and then I put another one, and I start to set it just very nicely, like a chimney or something of that sort. Prabhupada said, no, not like that. And I said, how? He said, every which way. When he said every which way, he meant randomly. And then I started building, and I built this thing, and there was a gap in the middle, and the Srila Prabhupada came and placed the Anantasesha. He said, put more. After I'd pretty well hidden the deity with bricks, he told me to go up, and the others came down.
So if you went down, you see that ladder, bamboo tied together with pieces of string. He goes down and he comes up, and everybody's kind of, his all godbrothers are there. We're all there. And he said, now sees Brahmananda, Gargamuni, Devananda, Tamal Krishna's there. And so everybody kind of were thinking, who's going to speak? Who's going to speak? I remember I was also thinking that way. And then he says, Malvati, you speak. And I mean, everybody was floored. I was floored. So what can I say? I'm just looking around. Here's all these learned Vaishnavas, certainly more learned than I'd ever be. I just stood up and spoke about Srila Prabhupada. I remember I was crying a little bit. And then afterwards, I remember Gargamuni came up to me and he said, that was very nice. And I always appreciated that, I was just reflecting on Prabhupada's expertness in putting us forward and utilizing us for the benefit of his mission. And knowing each one of our particular ability and our limitations, and even using our limitations to the best advantage, because in this situation, I was not, as I mentioned, I was not a pundit. I don't know Sanskrit verses. I wasn't fully learned in the Bhagavatam, but I had no hesitation about speaking on the glories of Srila Prabhupada, and it was absolutely the right thing to do at that time.
While we were at Mayapur, one young man named Bob Cohen came to our camp, and we were really surprised because we didn't get visitors just coming like that. And Bob Cohen was very intelligent and sober. He was a Peace Corps worker in India. So he came to meet Srila Prabhupada. He had attended our Pandal program at Deshapriya Park in South Calcutta. And he began to ask Srila Prabhupada very intelligent questions. And Srila Prabhupada gave very elaborate answers. And it became a regular routine that Bob would come and ask questions to Srila Prabhupada. And knowing that there was going to be an important discussion, I would ask Srila Prabhupada, should I call the others? And he would say yes.
My experiences with Prabhupada, of course, occurred in the Bhajan Kutir, where devotees wanted to know if I had any questions, which I certainly did. So I got to sit in there, I think, for several hours a day over probably a 4-day period, and discuss with Prabhupada my philosophical issues. I didn't really know a whole lot about what was going on in terms of parampara and how things work. I knew a little, but I just appreciated the qualities of Prabhupada. He made me feel very comfortable. His humor was very disarming. And Prabhupada was on a platform, so I was on the floor. So I'd always be looking at Prabhupada's feet, and somehow that gave me some blessing. One of the most dramatic moments for me personally is when I realized it's time for me to leave Mayapur. Because the night before, on Gaur Purnima night, Jamuna had come to me with tears in her eyes. And I remember the moon reflecting in her eyes, and she had tears and said, "You are so fortunate. Prabhupada spending so much time with you." She said it with such conviction that I was completely overwhelmed. And I realized that I might have to surrender. So I went behind the temple, behind the pandal, just collapsed in the rice paddies, started crying. I said, I can't give everything up. So the next morning, Prabhupada called for me again, asked if I had more questions. I said, thank you very much for what you've done, but I have to leave now. I have to get back to my teaching, which the Peace Corps had no idea where I was or what I did, so I could go back or not go back. And Prabhupada said, don't talk L-E-A-V-E. He spelled it out. Talk L-I-V-E. Don't talk leave, talk live. So I said to Prabhupada, so you want me to stay longer? He goes, yes. I said, well, if you tell me to, I will. And then he said to me, good boy, the same way you would say it to your pet. So at that time, in my heart, I felt I had become Prabhupada's pet, not realizing that I, in essence, had accepted him as my guru, though, when I think back at it. After that time, I was sold out to Prabhupada. A minor incident, but for me it was very major. And Prabhupada timed it just perfectly well to capture me.
One of Srila Prabhupada's most enduring projects was the Juhu land and Juhu development in what was then a remote suburb of Bombay. It was open marshland and swamps and coconut groves. Very few people there in those days. So it was difficult for the devotees, some of the devotees, to understand why Prabhupada wanted this land so much. Most devotees are familiar with all of the squabbles that went on for this land over such a long period, many years, and the fights and litigation that was waged over this land. But Prabhupada was so insistent that we acquire this land. And he was ultimately triumphant.
What we were thinking was, mostly at that time they were hippies. So they are being converted into good people. So we should help them whatever way we can. We are not rich or anything, but whatever little in the house is there, we should give. They used to come for cold water because March, April, it was so hot. So they are not used to this climate. And then we used to give limbu water and whatever is available in the house, we used to give them. Then once he was walking in the garden, Prabhupada. So some new devotees had come in the morning. So he shows our house and tells, this is Hare Krishna Annex. You all have left your mothers and come. Here is a mother for you. And anything you want now, you can ask her. And that is the house. And he pointed to our house. Afterwards we asked the devotees what he was telling. They said, this is Hare Krishna Annex.
My name is Smriti Warrior, and I lived on Hare Krishna land, B building on the ground floor. And my parents were Mr. and Mrs. Warrior that helped a lot with the temple and the devotees and did a lot of seva and basically grew up on Hare Krishna land. I was there before the devotees came, so when they first came, I was 6, 7 years old. And of course we'd never seen foreigners so much before, so when they would come, we would stare at them. They were like celebrities. We used to just sit there every move they made, we were watching them. Of course, at that time we used to tease and chant. We would chant, but we'd teasingly chant Hare Krishna or say Hari Bol. And as time went on, we started to like them, and they would be so nice to us. So we'd always go up and anything they wanted, we'd run and get it for them. Or when they were living on the rooftop, they would bathe up there, and I remember we used to see these soapy white lathered heads, Gargamuni, Brahmanand, Madhuvisa, This must be in Acharya's garden that he's getting a massage. Because he came out of there and went right into the house. And later on they started a Gurukul, which we attended. That was the only Gurukul we really enjoyed going to, and the 3 of them did it. It was so much fun. We used to do all kinds of things, little projects, learning shlokas, chanting, putting on dances when Prabhupada came.
Before even having the title to the land, he had a cornerstone laying ceremony. Prabhupada was the expert in everything. He was the supreme strategist. And he said that if we install deities on the property, no one will take them down. This is not done in India. That this would give us further right to the land. So he conducted this cornerstone ceremony, and later when the police did try to close down the deities, there was a public outcry which forced the situation towards Prabhupada's favor. But it was another 1.5 years from this cornerstone laying ceremony before Prabhupada actually acquired the deed to the land. But this was another maneuver Srila Prabhupada thought was important to establish our right to the land by installing deities. Having a very elaborate cornerstone laying ceremony, Prabhupada was teaching us all the time how to do business, how to manage our affairs. We were so innocent. We had no knowledge or experience in these kind of affairs. Buying land, getting titles, and what to speak of in India, where things are 10 times more difficult to